Guys, I hate to be the one to say this, but there truly is no one thing in Cardano, at least no one thing that's going to launch us to the moon. There's no project, no stablecoin, no DEX, no NFT, no metaverse that's going to make or break Cardano. There will be no developer who opens a glowing magic pulp fiction briefcase and unleashes on the crypto world that one dApp that will propel us forward toward our dreams. The one thing doesn't exist. We get really excited about the launch of singular products, but that's only because human psychology heavily overvalues milestones. The closest thing we'll ever have to one milestone that overpowers everything is still just the Bitcoin halvening. Even in Cardano, that is still the one event that rules them all. But the tumultuous cyclicality of that event will be just fine, because we were never building a launch pad for one all-powerful project. In Cardano, we were always building a whole economy. Ready? Let's go. Today, we'll discuss the long-awaited launch of Djed and Shen. Some people expressing their doubts about the future for Shen holders given the history of Age USD-based protocols, SundaeSwap with some governance news, and Paima Studios joining a Microsoft program. If your first thought when you saw this image was that neon lights inside a briefcase are probably not very advisable, or if you're finding value in these videos each weekday, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. Well, here we are, guys. It's been a long time since the Wyoming Cardano Summit when Charles called Shahaf Bar Geffen up on the stage and announced that Coty would be launching a stablecoin based on the Djed protocol. And you can see that today is the day that stablecoin has finally launched along with its associated reserve coin, Shen, and it is out in the wild. Right now, we are just below, it just barely ticked down from a 600% reserve ratio to 599. You probably already know that 400 to 800% ratio is kind of the happy zone they're looking for. Reserves in the Djed reserves right now, we've got 26,662,559 ADA. That is roughly equivalent, if my calculations are correct, to 10,323,743 USD and change. So we're looking at like 10.3 million Djed and USD, according to I went off CMC ADA to dollar calculation numbers. I have no idea what Djed uses as sort of their oracle for ADA to USD calculation. If Djed's a stable coin, that should be very similar to the Djed number. And indeed, it's pretty close. It's pretty close according to CMC. And there could be delays on my end, who knows what. But we've got quite a bit of money. We've got like $10.3 million in Djed on opening day. Of course, critics would say that's nothing compared to BUSD at 15 billion, USDC at 42 billion, or Tether at 67 billion. But 10.3 million is not too bad for the bear market opening day of really the first major non-synthetic stablecoin in the Cardano ecosystem, especially when you consider the hesitancy some people have around this stablecoin. Some people in the Cardano ecosystem were making posts like this today. And again, this is just me reading someone else's post. This is not me presenting anything as a statement of fact or prediction. This is someone else's post. I'm just reading it. A lot of people about to be burned by Shen. SIG RSV squad, salute you. Of course, that was a reference to the reserve token holders from some previous implementations of this type of triple coin stablecoin system. We've talked about this many times on the channel, but prior to Djed, there was Age USD and Sigma USD in the Ergo ecosystem that was based on the Age USD protocol. Of course, we've also discussed on the channel how the Djed white paper talks about that initial implementation of the Sigma USD, and on page 25 describes it as an implementation of minimal Djed. That, of course, brings us to the debate about the relative merits of minimal Djed implementations versus extended Djed implementations, which are described on page 10 of the white paper. That would probably lead you to this article on Coty's Medium from January 16th and this roadmap almost at the bottom, where you can see Djed 1.1.1 as minimal Djed, Djed 1.2 also minimal Djed, and Djed 1.3 as extended Djed. No matter how you come down on the minimal versus extended Djed debate, and no matter when you think Coty is actually going to get to Djed 1.3 and extended Djed, you got to admit, it's pretty nice to have a stablecoin in the Cardano ecosystem. You also have to admit, if you were one of those previous Sigma reserve token holders, it would be pretty easy to be once bitten, twice shy when it comes to all algorithmic stablecoins or over collateralized stablecoins or whatever marketing label we're trying to put on them to make them most palatable in these days after the whole Terra Luna algorithmic stablecoin explosion. I actually want to give a lot of credit to Coty. After the whole Luna Terra thing, it would have been pretty easy for a company like Coty to look at Djed and say, you know what? We're not actually going to finish. We don't want to do this anymore. They could have easily turned tail and run from the whole algorithmic stablecoin thing, but they didn't. They actually finished. So all due credit to Coty for finishing Djed and providing us with really our first major non-synthetic stablecoin in the Cardano ecosystem. Having said that, and for purposes of transparency, I'm more than happy to reiterate what I've said before, and that's that I'm not planning on holding any substantial amounts of Shen right now or at any point in the near future, just because I'm pretty careful and my risk appetite just doesn't currently extend that far. As always, that's not advice of any kind for anyone else. That's just what I'm currently doing. And in any case, I don't think it really matters that much for Cardano because Cardano was never about creating a platform for one superstar project to be launched or even for a single sector of projects like DeFi to exist on the Cardano blockchain, because the Cardano ecosystem isn't just a launch pad for DeFi projects. It's not a launch pad for NFT projects. It's not a launch pad for metaverses or for anything else. It's all of these things. We weren't ever building a launch pad for projects like that so that we could all ride these Ponzi-nomic trains. And I'm not calling any particular project that here. I'm just saying in crypto, we have seen projects based on Ponzi-nomics, a lot of them. And Cardano wasn't really built for, built as a platform for those kinds of things. It can be a platform for projects and it should be, but it's really an entire ecosystem. Cardano is really this. Cardano is 34 billion ADA out there floating around, being transacted, people staking, moving their stake around, projects launching, projects retiring, stake pools launching, stake pools retiring. It's an entire economic ecosystem. It's a new set of rails on which to do all things economic. It's a brand new parallel economic and financial system. It's much bigger than the launch of any single project. Our human psychology loves these kind of milestones. When will Cardano launch its first non-synthetic stablecoin? This is a big milestone that a lot of people have been looking forward to for a long time. When will we launch our first DEX? Then we got MusicSwap. When will we launch our first non-synthetic stablecoin? Then we got Djed. When will we launch our first big loan platform? Soon we'll have Liquid. We already have a few other types of loan platforms. All of these milestones will come and go, and our human psychology sort of demands that these are intense focal points of mental energy, but they're really not make or break moments for the Cardano ecosystem. It's an accumulation of all these things. It's the ecosystem as a whole organic thing, emanating from a million decentralized points of growth. It's a gigantic thing, this Cardano ecosystem. It's much bigger than any of these singular platforms. So I think it's a natural thing. It's an unavoidable thing for us to focus on these big milestones, these big launches of big projects. It'll be the same with metaverse projects when they finally launch at whatever point down the road. If any of them do ever launch, they could all fail. We don't know. But these big milestones, while they're emotionally satisfying, it's our psychology demands we put mental energy into them. They're not really what we're building here. What we're building here is this gigantic system, this gigantic organic thing that's much bigger than the launch of any single project, any single type of project, or even any single sector of projects like DeFi alone. What we need right now is not the biggest stablecoin, not the biggest DEX, not the biggest loan platform, not the biggest metaverse, not the biggest Web3 game. What we need right now is to be building the very best rails so that we can build all of these things, so that we can grow into the biggest ecosystem where people want to build all of these things. We just want to be the biggest economic system, and that involves being the best ecosystem, the sum of all these things. But that requires, at a fundamental level, being the best rails on which to operate all of these things. Speaking of Cardano DeFi projects, it looks like SundaeSwap is launching their own governance portal. So SundaeSwap Governance can now begin in earnest. And this is one that I've been sort of like curious. I've been curious to see which way this would go. Of course, SundaeSwap was one of our very earliest DEXs. It wasn't our first DEX. MusliSwap launched with an order book DEX, but SundaeSwap was sort of the first big launch of an AMM DEX, like people are used to seeing in the EVM world. It was the first one, and SundaeSwap was kind of the very brave DEX, because they launched and sort of ironed out a lot of the problems that later projects could sort of learn from. So SundaeSwap kind of paved the way. Other AMM DEXs came in after them, and we have a lot of really good DEXs in the Cardano ecosystem now. But SundaeSwap, I've been curious because they were the first really big launch. The MusliSwap order book DEX launch was it really was a stealth launch. Nobody knew it was coming, and all of a sudden they just appeared out of nowhere. They were sort of like the dark horse first DEX to launch. I really appreciate what they did. I also really appreciate what SundaeSwap did a little bit later as the first AMM DEX. But I've been very curious to see what direction SundaeSwap governance would go in, because there's sort of a blueprint for DeFi platform, DeFi project, DeFi protocol DAOs and governance to go in. There's always this question around fees. Like, how long does it take for the governance token holders to start submitting proposals that basically award themselves the fees from the platform? In Cardano, this is this is going to be interesting to watch. It's going to be interesting to watch this go down, because we've also got batchers. In Cardano, we've also got batchers who are taking a little bit of a certain amount of fees with all those transactions. And of course, the governance token holders are going to be wanting, probably going to be wanting, to redirect some fees. I don't know how this is going to shake out. I'm very curious to see the direction in which this goes with SundaeSwap. Of course, the first votes won't be about things like that. Here, this article says, the first forum temperature check introduces the proposed governance procedures document as a temperature check. So there'll be some sort of like formatting of the governance. This section is called Adoption of Governance Procedures as a first vote. But I'm interested to see the direction governance goes in, because it seems like economic interests always override everything else, not just in crypto or in DeFi or in DAO governance or anything like that, but just in human governance in general. Economic interests are always foremost. So I'm very curious to see how all this gets sorted out between the batchers and the protocol and the DAO, the governance token holders, the users of the platform. It's going to be interesting to watch all this go down. Paima Studios also had an announcement, something we kind of knew was already on the way. I think we've heard some rumblings about this in the past. This says Paima Studios has joined the Microsoft for Startups program. We'll work together to help game devs and Web3 entrepreneurs in Japan easily deploy their apps using the Paima engine with Azure's game services and new AI functionality. It was a natural fit. So I know what you're thinking. A lot of you out there are like, hey, listen, bro, I've never been begging for Microsoft to jump into our ecosystem because Microsoft is like a big tech name, but not just a big tech name. It's like the oldest, most traditional big tech name. I mean, we can come up with other names, but it definitely fits into that genre of older, gigantic tech companies. I mean, you've got IBM, you've got Apple, you've got Microsoft. It's Bill Gates' company, the company that Bill Gates brought to prominence. Not a lot of people in crypto are like, man, I just wish Microsoft was more involved in my ecosystem. However, I think the Microsoft that a lot of us remember from our youths is not really the same Microsoft that exists today. And obviously, such a gigantic company, they can offer a lot of resources. And I'm sure Paima Studios has weighed all of those benefits, and I'm sure they're going to make good use of their involvement in this Microsoft for Startups program. But I'm curious to see what happens here. I hope you're having a great week, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.